Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. There's a stack of envelopes sitting right there on your kitchen counter. And honestly, just looking at them sends your heart racing, right? You see those amounts in red, the past due notices, and boom, immediately your brain starts scripting this whole horror movie. You're imagining a repo truck idling in your driveway at dawn, a sheriff knocking at your front door, maybe even a jail cell with your name on it. It feels like one single missed payment is the first domino in the total collapse of your life. But listen to me, that visceral panic you're feeling right now, it is largely based on fiction. In this explainer, we're gonna absolutely de-escalate that fear. And we're doing it by replacing those scary stories in your head with cold, hard facts.
So what actually happens when you stop paying your bills? It's that terrifying question keeping you up at 2 in the morning, isn't it? You probably assume it's this immediate, catastrophic blow-up of your entire life. But here is the massive spoiler alert. That movie playing in your head about instant financial ruin and landing in handcuffs is almost entirely fiction. The real consequences are much slower, a lot stranger, and honestly, far more negotiable than your panic is telling you. The things you absolutely should fear are almost never the things that you actually do fear.
When your head is completely filled with these chaotic thought bubbles of worst-case scenarios, the handcuffs, the repos, it is totally paralyzing. But watch what happens when those terrifying abstract fears transform into a neat, color-coded calendar. Because, once you can actually see the real timeline of what happens, day by day and dollar by dollar, the whole situation stops being a monster under the bed. Today, we're swapping out those monsters for a highly actionable, highly predictable timeline.
Now, to really understand this timeline, you first have to grasp the central paradox of debt. Basically, not all debt is created equal, not even close. In fact, your debts fall into 3 completely distinct buckets: unsecured, secured, and government. And they behave absolutely nothing alike when you stop paying them. The true paradox here is that how dangerous a debt actually is has almost nothing to do with how loud it is. Seriously, the bills that scream the loudest can usually do the absolute least to actually harm you, while the quiet ones, man, those are the incredibly dangerous ones.
So let's look at how this builds, starting way down at the bottom of the danger ladder, unsecured debt. Think credit cards. Let's take a guy named Clark, right? He has a $6,000 balance that he just can't pay right now. On day 1, he gets hit with a fee, maybe 41 bucks. It's annoying, sure, but it's not the apocalypse. A lot of people think being 1 day late just totally ruins their credit score. It doesn't. Credit card companies generally won't even report you until you are a full 30 days past due. If you panic and scrape the money together to pay on day 12, the credit bureaus literally never even know it happened. Now, around 60 days, Clark's penalty APR triggers, jumping his rate to nearly 30%. Finally, at 180 days, that's 6 full months in, the bank quote-unquote charges it off, which basically just means they gave up trying to collect it themselves. See, it's a very slow 6-month progression.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the number 240. That's roughly how many dollars a debt buyer will pay the bank to purchase Clark's charged-off $6,000 debt. Literally pennies on the dollar. For less than the cost of a tank of gas and maybe a nice dinner out, that debt buyer now gets the legal right to chase Clark for the full $6 grand. That is their entire business model, guys. They buy the debt for 4 cents on the dollar, and they try to squeeze you for 40.
Then we have what I like to call the weird cousin of unsecured debt, medical debt. I know it might look absolutely terrifying with all those confusing line items and codes, but you can actually breathe a huge sigh of relief. It's surprisingly toothless. For starters, paid medical collections get removed entirely from your record. Even better, absolutely nothing gets reported to the credit bureaus until it's a full year over 1 whole year. And get this, any bill under $500 never shows up on your credit report at all. So that surprise lab bill actually gives you plenty of built-in breathing room. I promise you, no sheriff is coming to your door over it. Alright, so unsecured debt hands you 6 months of breathing room and, an inbox full of strongly worded letters. But let's contrast that with the next rung up on the ladder, secured debt. This is the stuff that can betray you in a single weekend. We're talking about your car loan here. According to the Federal Trade Commission, in a lot of states, the lender can repossess your vehicle the very second you go into default. That could mean just 1 single missed payment, and boom, they can legally walk right onto your open driveway and tow your car away without even giving you a heads up first. But listen, the nightmare of losing your car doesn't actually stop when the tow truck pulls away.
You're about to face the brutal reality of something called the deficiency. Here's how it works. The repo guy hauls your car off to an auction, where it almost always sells for rock-bottom prices. So say you owed $12,000, but it only sells for $5,000. You don't just get a clean slate, you still legally owe that $7,000 difference, plus the towing fee, plus the auction fee. It is wild. They take your car, they sell it at a massive loss, and then they legally bill you for the loss they chose to take.
Now, let's look at another category that moves at a much slower crawl: utilities and rent. The good news here is that they are legally required to warn you. Utilities usually give about 10 to 14 days written notice. And while many states do have cold weather rules that shield you from getting your heat shut off in the winter, beware the trap, because that moratorium is a deferral. It is not forgiveness. The bill is just quietly fattening up all winter long, and come spring, bam, you get hit with a massive balloon payment. Rent is pretty similar. Landlords cannot legally just lock you out themselves. A real eviction requires a lawsuit, a court hearing, and a sheriff, which can take anywhere from 5 weeks to 6 months. So it is serious, absolutely, but you'll definitely see it coming.
Okay, take a deep breath. Everything we've covered so far has been bound by a judge, polite timelines, or warning letters. Now we climb to the absolute top of the danger ladder: government debt. These guys are the ultimate rule breakers. The government plays by a terrifying rulebook that would be flat out illegal for any private company to use. They do not need to wait around for a judge's permission to reach into your life and take your money.
Let's look at federal student loans to see just how severe these powers really are. On paper, they look super generous. You aren't technically in default until you are 270 days or 9 months behind. But hey, that's not generosity, that's just a really long rope. And this brilliantly illustrates the danger, because the second you actually default, the Department of Education can automatically garnish 15% of your disposable pay straight from your employer. They can seize your tax refund, and they can even skim your Social Security checks. And they can do all of this without a lawsuit. The absolute worst thing you can do here is just go silent, because silence is exactly what triggers that automatic garnishment.
If you think student loans are aggressive, let me introduce you to the final boss, the IRS. This is the one bill on the entire ladder you absolutely never, ever ignore. The IRS has sweeping, incredibly severe powers. They can place liens on everything you own, they can freeze and completely drain your bank accounts, they can garnish your wages without ever stepping foot inside a courtroom. Let your tax debt climb past roughly $66,000? Yeah, they can even have the State Department revoke your passport. No joke.
But here is a piece of absolutely crucial math that can literally save you thousands of dollars. The IRS penalty for not paying your taxes is 0.5% a month. That's survivable. But the penalty for not filing your taxes, it is 10 times worse. It's 5% a month. So many people try to hide from the IRS by just not filing, thinking they're delaying the pain, but they are actually multiplying it by 10. Even if you are stone cold broke and cannot send them a single dollar, you must file your return on time every single time, because the act of filing alone cuts your penalty by 90%.
Okay, let's bring it back down to the day-to-day fear, those incredibly annoying phone calls. You might be sitting there sweating on the line, but honestly, you shouldn't be. Debt collection is largely psychological. When a collection agency buys your debt, their entire job is to make the walls feel like they're closing in on you so they can pay. But they are bound by really strict rules. They can't call before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m., they can't call up and tell your boss, and they absolutely cannot threaten to have you arrested. Look, there is no debtor's prison in America. We scrapped those back in the 1830s. Nobody goes to jail for an unpaid credit card. Nobody.
Here's something else you need to know. Every debt has an expiration date for lawsuits called the statute of limitations. It usually runs about 3 to 6 years, depending on your state. Once that window closes, the collector legally cannot bring a lawsuit against you. But beware of the power of a single number, 1. It only takes one single tiny payment or an admission in writing to completely reset that clock. If you send them $20 just to get them off your back, a debt that was legally dead claws its way right back to life, and the whole statute of limitations starts over from zero. This is called zombie debt. Never ever make a tiny good faith payment on an ancient debt without checking exactly how old it actually is. regular debt collector goes through the long, drawn-out process to sue you, win, and actually get a court judgment, you might have an invisible shield. If your only income is Social Security, disability, or pension, that money is legally protected, period. This means you are what's called judgment-proof. The collector can win their big lawsuit in court and still have to walk away with absolutely nothing because there's legally nothing they can take from you. Funny how they always seem to leave that little detail out of their threatening letters, right?
So the crucial point is understanding how this affects your long-term reputation. People always ask me, won't this absolutely nuke my credit for the rest of my life? Well, the truth is, a credit score isn't a permanent tattoo, it's a sunburn. It looks horrifying and it genuinely stings in year 1. But by year 5, if you're back to paying on time, the damage is barely a whisper. And by year 7, the vast majority of negative marks fade from the report completely. It heals, as long as you just stop standing in the sun. This brings us to the most practical takeaway of this entire explainer. I am officially giving you permission to stop panic paying. If there just isn't enough money to go around this month, you need to perform financial triage. You have to pay your debts in the exact order that protects your actual life, not the order that yells the loudest. Here is the breakdown. Step 1. Shelter. Pay your rent or mortgage first, because a roof is incredibly hard to get back once it's gone. Step 2. Utilities. So the lights and heat stay on for your family. Step 3. Secure debt, like the car that actually gets you to work, because remember, that can vanish in a single weekend. Step 4. Government debt, because the IRS never gets tired and they don't need a judge. And dead last, step 5, unsecured debt like credit cards. They scream the loudest for sure, but in a true emergency, they are literally the absolute least of your problems.
The whole entire system is engineered to make the most aggressive debts feel the most urgent. But as we've seen today, it's basically an illusion. The people who get destroyed by debt usually aren't destroyed by the debt itself. They are destroyed by the fear. By making a tiny payment that wakes up a zombie debt, or by hiding from the IRS instead of just simply filing their taxes. So tonight, I want you to do the one thing that little voice in your head has been begging you not to do. Open those envelopes. Sort them into the buckets we just discussed. Realize that almost every single timeline moves slower and offers way more off-ramps than your panic wants to admit. The monster under the bed was never a monster. It was a calendar the whole time.